Hello and good evening, and welcome to this webinar on projects planning and scheduling.
Hello, Dr. Akram.
Hello, Hayam. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you.
Okay. So, as an introduction and warm up for our webinar for today, let's consider this hypothetical question or scenario. If your boss walked into your office today and said the system if your boss walked into your office today and said the system is broken, can you figure out what is wrong and fix it? The question here is, would this be a project or not? So the answer, it looks like a project. Okay, so it looks like a project. So now you must take what you are given and organize the work into appropriate projects. So once you are given a task, you should start your project management process by initiating the project, even if the organization did not initiate a project. And when we say initiate a project, we always mean create a project charter. And of course, the contents of a project charter is more or less pretty standard and more or less common knowledge nowadays. So the project planning process, once you initiated the project, you progress into plan the project. And when you plan a project, you should have schedules and budgets. Not only schedules and budgets, you also are going to have project plans. Okay. Uh, but if I am or I want to be an effective project manager, I should have the ability to distinguish the proposed or the requested work. So in the previous example, we have at least two projects. So what are the two projects? Well, in such an example, the two projects is as stated in the request. And the request says, can you figure out what is wrong and fix it? So you need to have a project for figuring out what's wrong, and you need another project for fixing it. So you cannot progress into project scheduling and planning without clear definition of your project. So it's a very important skill to possess before initiating a project or projects is to have the ability to apply the basic definition of a project, which is an endeavor which has a unique outcome and has a unique starting and end dates. So an outcome of a project as per the definition will determine the project scope, and the project scope is the project. Okay, so here are from my years of experience in project management, these are my 6 principles for effective project management given a competent projects manager is on board. You see, classical project management, a project is considered successful up to 50% budget overrun. So if it is budgeted for $100,000, for example, if it closes at $150,000, it's considered a project success. And ignoring constraints of time completely. So, and as such, poor performance of projects, the classical success rate of projects is almost 34%. However, when you have a competent project manager on board and the competent project manager is applying a solid project management methodology, the chances of project success increases to 50%. Again, with budget overrun almost 50% and time more or less is also affected. So projects are a very risky business, and we need to do whatever we can to reduce such risks. Number one precaution is to hire a competent project manager. If you don't have a project charter and the project charter states who the project manager is, and you have a project at the same time, then it is kind of a crime, because this will result into wasteful utilization of organizational resources. So first principle is to understand that project management needs some inputs. Such inputs are basically information, resources, and material. Also, construction projects will need site planning, facilities, and utilities. And of course, all projects will need plans and schedules, and plans and schedules are actually information. However, because they are important category of information, they are explicitly mentioned here. So second principle is management is divided into administration and leadership, and leadership is defined as influence and facilitation. A third principle is to maintain visibility using S-curves, which is monitoring and controlling your schedule. And fourth principle is differentiate between project life cycle and project management life cycle. Fifth principle, differentiate between project deliverables and project management deliverables. And finally, always use a project management software. So planning and scheduling are sometimes confused. And in order to reduce such confusion, we have to revert back to basic definitions. So the definition of planning, it's a process of choosing the method and order of work. However, scheduling is a process of determining the interrelationship of associated timings of operations. So when we speak about a plan or a roadmap, we define a broad or a global or an overall duration estimation. Like we have a certain project plan and we say this project is planned to last 2 years or 3 years. But this is just a very high level estimation, and as it's sometimes referred to, guesstimation, from guessing. It's just not just estimation, it's guessing and estimation, so we call it guesstimation. Guesstimation. However, scheduling is an accurate definition and interlinking of activities with exact dates of happening. So it becomes a time schedule or a timeline linked to a calendar. Then we have a schedule. And of course, once we have a schedule, then we have our to-do list for each day, or what is supposed to happen for each day throughout the life of the project. So if you have a big project that is coming up, which is going to take many years to complete, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 years, you know generally what you want, but you aren't quite sure yet how to get there. So it is a long and complex path, especially that in a span of 5, 6, 7 years, things might change. And of course, you also become more familiar with the project environment and requirements as time proceeds. So how would you plan such an endeavor? So this will take us to the definition of progressive elaboration. Progressive elaboration is a technique where you have a small idea or a small headline, which is, for example, the name of the project, and you start to elaborate. So I have a project name. I elaborate the project name into a project charter. Then I elaborate the project charter into the project plans. So it is a continuous process of taking the small information that I have and I capture it in a designated document. Then I take this information and I apply processes and techniques for the next step in project management to produce a longer version of the output I already have in hand, which contains more details and more information, which enables me to build my project. So as time passes, the details of your project become merged or become elaborated on. But here, when we use the term progressive elaboration in planning, we actually mean that we use guesstimation for the project. However, we do planning for 6 months by 6 months or whatever. So we start to understand and elaborate on what's going to happen during the next foreseen duration. This allows us to update our plan. Also, it allows us to perform better monitoring and controlling. As such, as a result of the output of monitoring and controlling activities, I get a need to update and renew my plans and schedules. So as time passes and the details and the realities of the project become more evident, it becomes more relevant and applicable for me to elaborate and detail the plans for the next foreseen period. So you would then refine and add more details to your plan. In other words, progressive elaboration expects that you learn more about you are creating, and the details are made clearer as you progress through the project. So this is very important understanding of project planning and scheduling, because without such understanding, many planners try to plan projects which they are not even familiar with. So it's not like they have a previous project and they have a full lifetime previous project planned in their computer and they are just adjusting it. No, they almost have no idea of what they are planning, and they try at the same time to produce an exact and detailed project plan and schedule. So this is a pitfall which we should avoid simply by understanding that it is wiser to use progressive elaboration in projects. So we have another way also to enforce through policies and procedures to enforce progressive elaboration into projects, which we call it rolling wave planning. So in rolling wave planning, I essentially divide my project into phases. And when I develop my project into phases, I have an interface between phase 1 and phase 2, phase 2 and 3, and phase 4, and so forth. I have what's called a phase gate. And a phase gate is a point where I have to say go or no go for what follows. So the phase gate of phase 2, I inspect the output of phase 1 and I decide a go or no go to proceed with the project into phase 2. So rolling wave is again a very good or a very good best practice for project planning and scheduling. Okay, so we said we need to understand the difference between a project management life cycle and a project itself life cycle. And here we said when we speak about rolling wave planning, we are essentially dividing our project into phases. So a project management life cycle is made up of initiating the project, planning the project, executing the project, monitoring and controlling the project, and closing the project. So as a project scheduler or project planner, I need to understand this very clearly when I am creating my schedule. I have project management deliverables and I have project itself deliverables. And I have project management activities and I have the project itself activities. So if I ignore project management deliverables and project management efforts and cost of project management when I'm building my schedule, then my chances of success of the project are hit by a very big and huge blow because I omitted and overlooked a very important aspect of project success. So what's the difference between a project life cycle and a project management life cycle? Like we have seen in our previous example, we have divided our project into phases. So we have phase 1 is the feasibility studies phase. Phase 2, the planning phase, the design phase, the production phase, the turnover phase, and the startup phase. So by including planning as a separate phase, I make sure the cost of planning and the cost of project management activities is not omitted. So when I do phase gate project management or rolling wave project management, it has two names. We can call it phase gate project management or rolling wave project management. I make sure I have a better capture of my project, and I have a better executive or senior management control over budget expenditure. So this is a project which has initiation. Planning is a project which has initiation. Design is a project which has initiation. Production, turnover, startup, all are considered independent and separate projects that have initiation. So when we say initiation, we are speaking about a project charter, and a project charter that nominates a project and also approves a preliminary or a budget, a planning budget or a preliminary budget for the said phase. So if I have only one life cycle for the whole project, if I have only one cycle for the whole project, as a top executive or senior manager, I get to review only one project charter and I get to approve only one budget for the whole project from beginning to end. And if the project takes 6 or 7 years, maybe the project manager will forget to send me reports, and I will forget to follow up with finance and accounting and forget with the project manager, and money will continue to be spent on such a project without returning to me for review and approval, and it might end up in a big catastrophe. So here when we use phase gate, so when we use phased gate project management, we have the benefit of continuous authorization of different phases of the project. So as an example, we have what is commonly known as EPC projects. So EPC projects are engineering, procurement, and construction. So here, production, the part which is called here production, which we refer to as the project or execution of the project. So if I have only one big cycle like this, traditionally the view of project management was one big cycle, and we have initiation, which is initiation and planning, and we have execution, and we have monitoring and controlling and close out. So if I have only one big project management life cycle for the entire project, the part I refer to as engineering, procurement, and construction becomes the whole project, or the execution part of the project. However, here I have design and I have production. So design is essentially engineering, which is a separate phase, and I have production, which is construction. And how about procurement? Procurement actually overlaps design because I start procurement before I end the phase gate of design, and I start and procurement will continue for a very long time, probably will even continue after production and into the turnover and startup phase, because procurement is a continuous and a very long process. So here my example is, if I have such a project, I have a go, no go. Each one of these light colored lines is a phase gate, or a go, no go, continue the project or stop the project decision point for senior management. So my first charter as a senior manager was somewhere here. So here at this point, I approved a charter and budget for a feasibility study. The output or product of such a phase of a project is the feasibility study itself. So the feasibility study will give us projections and recommendations, and based on the result of the feasibility study, I have the opportunity to either approve the planning phase of the project or cancel the project. So now if I approve the planning phase of the project, the first thing is I have initiation of the planning phase. And like we said, when we say initiation, it means a project charter, and a project charter will nominate a project manager and will suggest a budget. And as I approve here the charter for planning phase, I endorse the project management as well as approve the commitment of resources for the planning phase of the project. So, for example, the planning phase recommended a 10 years estimation for the completion of the project. And as a senior manager, I know the market will be saturated in 6 years or less. And I have in mind that I have to finish my project to be marketable in 5 years. So the output of planning is 10 years. Then I say you have to try to replan it to finish in 5 years. Upon successful production of a project plan which is feasible and logical, that they can finish in 5 years instead of 10, I approve as a senior manager the charter for the design phase. And again, the charter for the design phase will nominate a project and so forth. So what's important here is I can have different project managers for different phases. So if I know the feasibility needs somebody who's very good in finances and economics, so I can nominate a project manager for the feasibility study who is good at financing. The planning phase is given to a project planner or specialist in project planning, or I can assign a project manager and support him with a project planning consultant, for example. And the design, I can select and nominate a project manager for the design phase who is very well experienced in design of similar projects, and so forth. So here I am answering actually a question raised by Asad, Yakti Asad. And I hope I have answered your question and I have provided you with examples. Okay.
Yes, Doctor.
Yes, or you need more examples, please?
We need more example about this, please?
Can you just give me a longer question so I can answer you? Also, can you please just pronounce your name?
أسعد ياكتي.
Asad Yakti. Okay. Okay, Mr. Asad, could you please just elaborate in your question? Give me more details. What kind of examples are you looking for?
About the
About waterfall project management?
elaborate.
A progressive elaboration. We're going to come to work breakdown structure sometime in this presentation. We'll make sure we get to work breakdown structure, and we will say how we elaborate using work breakdown structure for normal decomposition of any project. We decompose our projects through work breakdown structure, and essentially as we decompose it, we elaborate, we perform progressive elaboration for the project. But here when we refer to progressive elaboration and rolling wave, we are talking about a philosophy or a way of thinking as related to how to define and build your projects, which is essentially phased gates. But what we mean by progressive elaboration and what's the difference between progressive elaboration and phased gate is phased gates, I divide my project into phases. But what if the design phase itself takes 4 years? So I cannot plan 4 years into the design phase itself. And I already have one charter and one budget for the entire phase, and I cannot divide it into more phases. I have some constraint that prevents me from breaking down the design phase into smaller phases. So what I do is I make a top level plan for the 4 years. But I always do projections which is look ahead. So I have to make a 6-month look ahead. So I come to the activities expected for the next 6 months, and I start to do progressive elaboration for the plans and the schedules. So I start to break down the work breakdown structure I already have for the next 6 months into smaller pieces. So when I break it down into smaller pieces, I can perform more accurate risk assessment. I can perform more accurate budgeting. Also, I can perform more accurate definition of inputs into activities. So I start to assign inputs. Like I said, it gives me an opportunity to produce a more accurate budget. And in order to produce a more accurate budget, I have to calculate more accurately the inputs into activities. So I can plan for my next 6 months by breaking down the work breakdown structure into smaller pieces. And once I have a smaller or more a finer work breakdown structure or a lower level of work breakdown structure, I can have a better working plan even for monitoring and controlling. Also, I keep on during my project management as a project manager, is always very important to have look aheads for my next week, for my next 2 weeks, and for my next 4 weeks. And if I am in a country that suffers from supply chain, it faces huge supply chain issues, then I must have like a 3 month or 6 month, depending on the life cycle of supply chain, which is common in such a place. I have to investigate and make sure the availability of materials and resources for what's going to happen next week. Is everything available? What's going to happen after 2 weeks, after 4 weeks, after 2 months, or 6 months, depending. Maybe if I am in a place where there is no challenges related to logistics, I only need to look ahead for 2 weeks or 4 weeks. But depending on my understanding of the nature of my project, the nature of resources and inputs into the project, and like I said here, we start procurement somewhere in the design. We don't wait for the design to be concluded 100% before we start ordering. Why do we order early in the design? Because we have items which are referred to as long lead items. Such items need a very long time before I have material on site. So if I wait to finish the design and start ordering long lead items, then I will have a gap here, 6 months, 1 year, I don't know, for obtaining long lead items. Actually, we always have, before the design itself, we have a phase here, we call it feed design, front-end engineering design. So when I do front-end engineering design, I will do feed design right after feasibility, before planning. So right after feasibility, I will do front-end engineering design. So I understand more or less what is expected of the project, and I will also identify the long lead items. So I will be ordering here. So procurement actually will start even before detailed engineering or detailed design. It will start feed design after the feed design or during the feed design itself if a long lead item is really challenging. For examples, if you have a special steel pipes, steel pipes of a special grade, like X85, for example. So it will need to be ordered and made to meet such a higher specification. So it will take longer time. Also valves, for example, in oil and gas sector, valves takes a very long time to produce. So here during my feed design, I understand the high integrity pressure valves, or we call it, for example, HIPS, because these are very special valves and they are not available on shelf and they are built according to my feed design parameters. So I start ordering here. But I will do progressive elaboration while I am working through look aheads or schedule look aheads, not only to refine my schedule, but also to make sure the execution of my project is going to happen. Because if a valve is not in place or a resource or a material is not available and the scheduled date happens, the task is not going to be executed because material is missing or a certain resource is missing. So I have to understand and elaborate in the definition and the inputs of tasks enough so I understand when I have a look ahead. For example, I have the valve, I have the resources, but I don't have a crane that is big enough to install it. And it will take me at least 10 or 15 days to get such a crane on site to install such a valve. So if I don't have enough details in my schedule to state a crane of such capacity is going to be required during my planning phase, then I will miss it. But what if it's missed in planning, but I understand that I have to do progressive elaboration. So when I come to inspect such an activity, 2 months before it, I make a meeting. I get all the people who are responsible for executing such a task, and I ask them, what do you need? And he will tell me, I need X, Y, Z. What do you need? X, Y, Z. Do we have X, Y, Z, or what is missing? Then I start to follow and chase what's missing to make sure what's missing is available on site on the set date. So this is how I practice as a project manager, progressive elaboration. Even we said progressive elaboration is a philosophy. So even if the process or procedure of the project that I was assigned to does not support phased gate or progressive elaboration, while I am managing the project, I have to perform progressive elaboration anyway through look aheads. I look ahead, but when I use look aheads for execution, I have a look ahead for 2 weeks, 4 weeks, 2 months, or whatever. But when I have a look ahead for the purpose of planning, then I have a longer duration for planning. So it's very important also to remember that when we refer to projects that are going to be managed using a project management methodology, such as waterfall or agile, we have to understand it has to be a significant project. So such a significant project or a large project, you have to say it is new to the organization. So it has to have a novel idea. It's not something that we have done many times before. Otherwise, it loses its significance. So it's new to the organization. Resources from many countries. So I am going to import valves from France. I'm going to import steel from Germany. I'm going to have engineers from Italy and so forth. It has more than 200 people on the team, lasts longer than 1 year, and has a budget of over $10 million. So if I have a small project, we cannot describe in Arabic. It's against policy. I'm very sorry. It's against policy to discuss anything in Arabic. So you should have a large project in mind, budget over $10 million, more than 200 people, lasts longer than 1 year, resources from many countries, and it is novel to the organization. Otherwise, we apply tailoring. And to all projects, large or small, we apply tailoring. And what we mean by tailoring is I inspect the methodology and take parts that are good to my project and will help my project, and other parts which are effort that is not going to add value to my project, I start removing it. And of course, if I have a very important and very expensive project, I will try to be more careful on what to eliminate from the methodology. But when I have a very small project with a very small budget, it is exactly the opposite. I have to be very careful on what to apply from the methodology to my project. So let's examine 10 reasons why projects fail. So we have inadequately trained or inexperienced project managers. So number one reason for projects failure is not having a competent project manager, or not having a project manager at all. That's why we refer to initiation as the generation of a project charter that assigns a project manager and approves project budgets. If I don't have a project charter and I am assigned to a project as a project manager, I quickly generate a project charter and have the responsible people to sign it and approve it. So failure to set and manage expectations. This has to do with customer expectations and collecting project specifications. Poor leadership at any and all levels. Failure to adequately identify, document, and track requirements. This is sometimes referred to as, I just forgot the term, but this is very important that my project definitions has 100%. It's called configuration management. So making sure all requirements are captured and tracked, this is referred to as configuration management. And it's a very important aspect of project management to keep in mind. So poor plans and planning processes, of course. And we have poor effort estimation, cultural and ethical misalignment, inadequate or missed methods, inadequate communication, including progress tracking and reporting, misalignment between the project team and the business or other organization it serves. So now we are going to discuss work breakdown structure. So the meaning of work breakdown structure, it is a hierarchical decomposition of a project into smaller and more manageable components. It is a tree diagram that organizes the work into work packages, which are the smallest units of work that can be independently planned and executed. So here, when we say independently planned, we actually refer to performing very important things on such units or tasks. Risk management and estimation, duration estimation and cost estimation. So the more refined my work breakdown structure is, the more accurate my risk assessment and my estimation is. But again, when do I stop? How small do I get? This is a very important question when I am doing decomposition or breaking down things into smaller items in order to have more accurate assessment of risk and more accurate estimation of time, resources, and cost. And also, it is also a conjugate or a mirror meaning for progressive elaboration. How much do I have to progressively elaborate? So it's a balance, like I said, depending on how important and how expensive the project is, and how novel, and many other things. And of course, if I am using waterfall methodology or using agile methodology. So the PM book defines WBS as a deliverable-oriented hierarchical decomposition of the work to be executed by the project team to accomplish the project objectives and create the required deliverables. It's very important here in this definition, the word deliverable. So I take a deliverable and start decomposing it. I can very easily get led astray by doing things and including it in my schedule and start to add cost to it that are not linked to a deliverable. So it has to be very, very well understood that WBS is deliverable related. Okay, so here we have characteristics of WBS. It says deliverable or phase-based hierarchical structure. So when I say phase-based, it means I am dividing it into phases. So that's basically what I do. But inside the phase itself, I have to use deliverables to decompose and to produce my WBS. So it has to contain 100% of the scope of work. It communicates the scope of work to project stakeholders. It can be graphic, it can be tabular, or a list form. Okay, here he suggests 3 levels used to identify elements and work packages. This is not very accurate actually. We have different rules for determining what level of WBS we have. And we have a very important practice, which is payment against milestones. And also we have damages against milestones, contracts against milestones. So milestones, so in order to have milestones that I will only pay against achievement of such milestones, I need my planner and scheduler to understand that I need milestones to do a good contract. A very good contract is a contract that is built around milestones. So if I have a delayed milestone, I apply damages to the milestone. I don't wait for the whole project to perform my delay analysis, because delay accumulates. So if I don't stop a delay for a certain deliverable or a milestone, it can progress without me noticing I have an accumulated delay, which will eventually result in delaying my entire project. So it's very important to understand that when I perform good work breakdown structure practices, I end up with a deliverable based milestones list. And this list can be used to build my contract, to indicate payment against milestones, which is very, very important, as well as damages against milestones. And here, from practical experience in payment against milestones, it's customary to know that material on site for a certain package will result to entitlement for the contractor to receive 80 or 90% of the value of a certain work package. But if I say I will only pay against the milestone of 100% delivery of all the items related to the work package, I will make sure that I will only pay for materials that if I bring another contractor, he will build the same outcome without coming back to me and say I need to buy this and this and that and that and so and such forth. But if I say I am going to pay 80% for material on site, the contractor might start to bring me things that are available and ready available in the near market, and I have not made a deliverables schedule because it will complicate my schedule, and I start to pay him 80% for everything he delivers, then he delivers like 60 or 70% of the material of the work package, and he receives 80% of that money, and then he says, I don't want to finish the job. I am in a very big trouble. But if I will say I will pay against a milestone, delivery on site means delivery of all these items. So I will not pay for each item delivered on site. I will pay against a milestone, and such a milestone is the availability on site for all these items, and it becomes part of my contract with the contractor. And again, I will assign delay against milestones. So in order to perform good milestone management, I need to have good milestone project planning and scheduling. Okay. So we have deliverable-based work breakdown structure. We have phase-based work breakdown structure. We discussed both. And we have resource-based work breakdown structure. Of course, again, this is very important, which is on the type of resource or the business function of the resource. A resource can be a facility, a type of software used in the project, or equipment. Staffing is also part of the resource group. So I will also have an organizational breakdown structure or resource-based work breakdown structure, and I need to make sure my work breakdown structure and organizational work breakdown structure are actually overlapping. Because if I need a certain resource and it cannot be made available for the work breakdown structure, especially when I start to apply the scheduling and determine the time when it needs to happen, then I have a problem. So I need to have a clear organizational breakdown structure and a work breakdown structure, and where, for example, my types of project are resource sensitive, so I need to assign tasks based on the resource-based work breakdown structure rather than assign resources to the tasks according to a work breakdown structure. So we have a risk-based work breakdown structure, and this type of structure is organized by the type of risk the project may encounter during its execution. The main groups of risks may include categories such as people, environment, and equipment. Furthermore, the risks are color-coded according to their impact. Responsibility-based work breakdown structure is the same like resource-based work breakdown structure. Now we have levels of work breakdown structure. We have a work package level, and we have deliverables level, and we have a project level. So this is what we mean by level 2. But here by 3 levels of work breakdown structure. But again, we are going to examine our rules in next slide, which is our last slide for today's presentation. No, actually one more. So what I mean by a project level is I will divide my project into big components. For example, I am building a university. So the main components of such a university is a utilities area, is a recreational area, and an educational area, plus small sports area. So it is mainly divided into 4 areas. So when I start to say my project is divided into 4 areas, so this is level 1 of my project. But when it comes to deliverables, I will start to break down. Let's take, for example, the recreational area, and it's going to be, for example, 4 cafeterias. So level 2, if I say level 2 is 4 cafeterias, and my milestones will be cafeteria 1, cafeteria 2, cafeteria 3, and cafeteria 4, I cannot find a contractor who will accept to get paid when he finishes the entire cafeteria. It will not happen. So what I need to perform here in level 2 is what we call product breakdown structure. So I will take cafeteria 1 and divide it into products. So for example, I have the kitchen area, and I have the service area, and I have the kitchen furniture, and I have the serving furniture, for example, and I have the interior decoration of the kitchen area and the interior decoration of the serving area, and I have the exterior of my cafeteria. So now I can have these as milestones, and I can start to assign payment against milestones for such parts of the product. But when it's finished, I have an object. It's not divided into plumbing or electric wiring. It's not by a type of trade. No, it is by a component or part, a physical part of the project itself. So I start to decompose my project into the smallest possible product breakdown structure. And after I have decomposed it into small parts, I will take each part and decompose it into work packages, and I will take the work packages and divide it into activities. So I can make my milestones against work packages, or I can make my milestone against the smallest product breakdown structure. And I, as one, prefer to assign my milestones against the smallest level of product breakdown structure. So level 2 actually can be divided into sub levels, and work packages level also can be divided into sub levels. We have a rule we're going to examine. So we have a 100% rule, and this rule states that the WBS includes 100% of the work defined by the project scope and captures all work deliverables to be completed, including project management. The rule applies to all levels within the hierarchy. So we have 100% rule. We have outcomes, no actions. So the WBS should focus on the outcomes that need to be produced. Like I said, the smallest item or the smallest level of the product breakdown structure. So I have to decompose my project into product breakdown structure before I proceed into performing work breakdown structure. So when I say product breakdown structure, I am breaking down a product. And when I say work breakdown structure, I am taking the smallest piece of this product, and I am defining what kind of work and activities I need to do in order to realize it and have it in actualization. So we have our 880 rule, and our 880 rule states each work package should be small enough to be manageable and measurable, but large enough to be meaningful. Work packages are typically defined as tasks that can be completed within 8 to 80 hours. So we have, if a task is if a task is less than one workman day, because one man will work for 8 hours for one day. So if a task is less than workman day, we add it to another small task or a bigger task, so we don't end up with very small items in our work breakdown cycle. Like I said, how much detail, how much progressive elaboration do I need to get? So this is my guiding rule, which says 880 rule. So a work package of a minimum of one workman day and a maximum of 10 workman days. So if a task that can be finished in one day and needs more than 10 people to finish it, I should consider to break it down into two packages. Why? Because estimation and risk, I can perform better risk and better estimation for smaller items. And like I said again, I should always take in consideration the importance of the project and the allocated budget for the project. So if I have a project that is small, it might not need planning, or if I have a project that it is familiar and it's not unique and it's similar to projects that we have done hundreds of times, so all risks are known and all estimates are clearly known, so I don't really need to go to such detailed level of work breakdown structure. So now we have come to the end of our webinar for today. And I thank you very much for your attendance. And if you have any questions, please open your microphone and ask me directly.
Thank you so much, Dr. Akram, for the information.
Thank you very much for your attendance, everybody. Okay. I believe there are no questions, and I thank you very much for your attendance, and see you next week in our next webinar.